record this, so I just want to let you guys know that I'm recording. I have a couple of students who are not able to make this, so I wanted to make sure that it was available to them. So today I'm going to talk about exploring competencies for medical school admissions. Some of you, I see that we have probably already talked about this, but I'm going to encourage you through this conversation to look at the self-assessment that will be in the handout that I give to you, and to encourage you to start working on that self-assessment. But today I'm going to sort of talk about how medical schools are looking at your application, which will help you to understand how you might fill out that self-assessment. Okay, so first of all, I know you guys are all supposed to check into this, so I just wanted to give you a second to do that. Somehow the second meeting today is cohort A and the first is cohort B. Not quite sure why that is, but that's the way it's set up. And I will put this up again at the end for anybody who missed it. Are we all ready to move on? All righty. So I want to start with some definitions. And it's important to understand how medical schools are looking at your application, because what they are not doing is looking at your GPA and your MCAT score and saying, okay, we're not Harvard, so we're not going to take the top students, and we're not an offshore school, so we're not going to take the lower end students. You know, this is our slot. And I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially out there on the internet and the student blogs, that that's actually how you choose medical schools. Well, here's my GPA and here is my MCAT score, and therefore this is the right school to me. And what that means is that all of a sudden, the admissions process fulfills their imagination of it. It becomes random and capricious. Well, this school has a lower average GPA, but I didn't get in there. And this school has a higher average GPA, but I got in there. So that doesn't make any sense. It's just random. And no, it's not random. It's because they're looking more at your whole application than students imagine. This year, I have students with grades that are over a 3.9, MCATs over a 5.20, who have no offers of admissions. I have a student with a 3.29 and a 5.04 MCAT who's been accepted. So if it were only grades, that wouldn't be true. And this is something I see every year. Students with high metrics that are not accepted, and students with low metrics who are. That does not mean that every student who has a 3.2 is going to get in, or a 3.3, and that doesn't mean that every student with high metrics isn't, right? It just means that they're looking at more than just the metrics. So what are they looking at? Well, we can talk about what's called competency-based admissions. A few years back, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute and the AAMC, American Association of American Medical Colleges, and some other NIH and some other organizations sat down and said, we need to think about how we are producing doctors. We're producing a whole lot of doctors that are just not lovely people who, you know, and we all know this stereotype, right? Oh, that doctor will make a great pathologist, right? Or the surgeon that won't listen to the patient with no bedside manner, but it's okay because all that surgeon's patients are unconscious. Well, it turns out that those aren't very good doctors. They don't get compliance with regimen. They don't get good medical outcomes because they are not building that rapport and trust with their patients. So if that's true, what are the qualities in a physician that we value, that we see are linked to good outcomes? If these are the qualities that lead to good outcomes in physicians, what are the qualities that we need to train in medical school? And if these are the qualities we need to train in medical school, what are the qualities that we're looking for in an applicant that is going to allow them to progress, to grow into those competencies? And so what I'm going to show you today are the core competencies for entering medical school students, which are what they use to evaluate your application. This leads to a process called holistic review, which I will also talk about in more detail later. It's not namby-pamby, we'll look at the whole applicant. It's a formal process. And it begins with the mission of the institution and brings in qualities that fulfill the mission of that institution and create the kinds of doctors that that institution is trying to create. And that leads us to this next concept, which is slightly different than competency-based admissions, but of mission-based admissions. Every medical school has different values from every different medical school. They are not all the same. You can learn to be a primary care physician at Duke, or you can learn to be a highly specialized physician scientist at Duke. Every medical school will train you to be the kind of doctor that you want to be. But most people going to Duke are going to end up in specialized medicine or academic medicine. They are doing very intensive research throughout their medical school. Penn is very similar. 2/3 of Penn's graduates graduate with dual degrees, a master's in science, a master's in biotechnology and innovation, a PhD. These schools value undergraduate research because that's what they're looking for, people who will incorporate research into their careers. But if you want to be a primary care physician, wouldn't you rather spend your time doing primary care? You could go to NYU's campus out on Long Island. It's a 3-year medical school focused on primary care. So you only have to borrow for 3 years worth of medical school. And guess what? It's free. So all you're borrowing is cost of living. That's a very different experience. So who are you? This means that there is no perfect applicant. I cannot give you a list of things you need to do to get into medical school because you need to figure out who you are, what your mission is. You cannot be the perfect applicant. Nobody is the perfect applicant. But you will have a lot more success in getting into medical school if you choose medical schools that share your values. You need to explore your competencies in a way that demonstrates what is valuable to you. And this is mission-based admissions, choosing medical schools not based on their ranking or their metrics, but on mission fit. Okay. Duke, by the way, does have a primary care program. They call it their primary care leadership program. It has 4 seats in it out of the whole medical school. It's not much. Probably not the thriving interactive community you might be interested in learning if you are interested in primary care. So what are the competencies for entering medical students? And there are really 2 sets of competencies broadly defined. There are the academic competencies. And those are critical thinking, quantitative reasoning, scientific inquiry, written communication. And yes, they are going to evaluate these competencies through your grades and your MCATs, but they are also going to evaluate them through letters and through the experiences that you choose. For somebody interested in becoming a physician scientist, scientific inquiry becomes the most important of these competencies. This is what an MD PhD program cares most about, is your ability to work as an independent and creative scientist. But we need physicians who can communicate too, not just to their patient, but more broadly. Atul Gawande has really shaped the conversations around end of life care, in large part because of the writing he did in Being Mortal and in his other books. The Checklist Manifesto has shaped how doctors think about what they're doing in the operating room. That ability to communicate. This is why we need English majors who are physicians. Critical thinking, of course, is important for all physicians. So they're going to evaluate these, not just through your grades, not just through the test scores, but through the things that you choose to do and the things that people say about you as you're doing them. There are also, personal competencies. And these are the qualities that will allow you to create relationships with your patients. Again, there's no tests for these. Well, actually there are. And more we're starting to see these personal qualities evaluated through situational judgment tests, the Casper test. Don't worry about these right now, people. These are not things that you study for. We can talk about them later. I'm not trying to cause more anxiety. Multiple mini interviews. There's all kinds of metric ways to evaluate personal competencies, but they're also going to be evaluating them through the writing that you do on your application, through the letters of evaluation that you receive, through the choice of experiences that you've had. Teamwork, right? You can get teamwork in all kinds of ways, and in the way that you choose to get it is about you. You can show that you understand teamwork through participation on a team. Team sports, medicine is a team sport. That's why teamwork's important. But you could also do that by being an integral group an integral part of a laboratory group, or a leader in your laboratory classroom, or somebody who works with a group of other students on a large project through the McKean Center. It's all kinds of ways to show teamwork. And your job is to do that in ways that is meaningful to you, that demonstrates where your values lie. Cultural competence and social skills are incredibly important to a physician. You need to understand that people who have different beliefs and different priorities than you, that there are autonomous people who get to make their own healthcare decisions, even when they don't coincide with yours. You need to have the skills to create trust in relationships with your patients. Service orientation is not a competency that they want to see if you're a good person and say you spend so many hours. My favorite is, how many hours of volunteering is enough? It's not about the hours. It's not like there's some criterion where, okay, well, he did 18 hours last month and that's enough to be a good person. They don't actually care about whether or not you're a good person in those terms. What being a good person is understanding your role as a physician, that you will have great responsibility over the lives of others, but that you also have your own life. And that really is a difficult balance. So back to these tests, the Casper, the situational judgment test. One of my favorite example of these are actually a really wonderful way to demonstrate the importance of exploring your interest in service. Service is often about balancing your needs with the needs of others in a very real way. You are volunteering, but people come to rely on you. When you are volunteering at the hospital, you are not showing you are a good person. You are treating a patient and you have an obligation to that patient. So one of the classic examples is it's 5 o'clock and you're on your way home and you get a phone call from one of your patients, and that patient says that they need to see you immediately. You happen to be having dinner tonight with your family for the first time in a month. What do you do? And I'll tell you right now, the answer is not simple, right? It's not, oh, well, I would throw everything down and go out with see that patient, right? And my family can wait. Nor is it my family comes first always and that patient can wait, right? Neither of those is the right answer. And in all of these things, it's the ambiguity that's important. So you have to ask questions. Who is my patient? Is this somebody who calls me 3 times a week and at 5 or 5:30 and says, I need to see you right now? Is this somebody who is at death's door and this might be the moment? Is this a really sick person? Do you have somebody to cover tonight? Lots and lots of questions that you have to ask. And how do you study for a situational judgment test or a Casper? Well, you put yourself in places where you have to reason through these things, these kinds of dilemmas. And so service is one way for doing that. So these are, again, the personal competencies that they are looking for and evaluating in pre-medical students. And not every medical school is looking for the same things. There are some schools like Quinnipiac that are very focused on interprofessional training, where teamwork is absolutely the critical part for them. There are medical schools that are focused on social justice, where cultural competence and service orientation shine. In the same way that there are schools that prepare physicians to become academic physicians that are looking at things like the ability to create new knowledge and research. Okay, so everybody always at some point comes in and says, what should I be doing this summer? Or what should I be taking next semester? Or where should I volunteer? Or some question along that line. And I always give the same answer. And it's not because I'm mean and snarky. It's because I don't know the answer for you. And we start talking about what do you want to do and what is important to you, where your questions are. Should you do research? I don't know. Is research interesting to you? If you've tried research and it's not interesting to you, you don't have to continue doing it. And this is true for exploring all of your competencies and all of your experiences. When they stop being meaningful, try something else, find something that is meaningful to you. Your job in your application, those students who are most successful are not always the ones with the highest grade point averages. In fact, I would say the single most important thing is an application that makes sense, where they tell a narrative, where I can see where they started where they ended and where they want to go and why. And that is a really hard application to write. Really hard application to write. The more experience that you have that informs that, the easier it will be for you. So do things that are important, do things that are meaningful. There are many ways to get the kinds, to demonstrate the kinds of competencies that medical schools are looking for. So let's turn to holistic review. Like I said, not a namby-pamby hand wavy, we look at the whole applicant. This is a formal process. In fact, the AMC has a group of physicians that will go into your medical school and sit down with the admissions committee and say, let's create a rubric for holistic review at your institution. And it's different at every institution because it is a formal process that begins with the mission of the institution and selects a diverse body of students who will be likely to fulfill that mission. In other words, they are biasing this towards students who will fulfill the mission of their institution. But it also recognizes that students learn from one another. And so they aren't looking for a cookie cutter student. They're looking for diversity in those students. And that is diversity of interest, that is diversity of background, of race and ethnicity. It's diversity of sexual orientation. It's every kind, diversity of the kinds of schools that you attended, right? Students have to realize that attending a small liberal arts college in rural Maine adds some diversity to most medical school classes in and of itself. They're looking for different people because you will be learning primarily from one another. Most medical schools, there are still schools that have didactic curricula, but most medical schools now have flipped classrooms or problem-based learning or some other kind of learning. Actually, you guys realize that one of the great things about being at a place like Bowdoin is you are already participating in a learning style that is valued by most medical schools. That is, it will feel comfortable being in medical school because you've already started learning from one another in our small curriculum. So this is holistic review, and it has a slightly different lens than the way I talk about it as somebody on my side of admissions, but I want to show you what their model looked like, and it's called the EAMS model. EAMS for experience, attributes, and metrics. So this is the model that they begin with, and it includes experiences that are both experiences that are extrinsic, and I can think of one very important historical and world event, and you might even call it a political event going on right now that's going to really dramatically affect how they look at your application, right? We're all sitting here on a Thursday morning on Zoom instead of in main lounge because of the pandemic. And the pandemic has really very much shaped the kinds of experiences that are available to you guys and will make it very different from the experiences that somebody who applied last year or the year before had on their application. And medical schools are very much looking at that. But they're also looking at you and what you bring to the table, right? And these can be things that are chosen experiences like leadership or healthcare experience. I will just say to you right now that the pandemic is not an excuse not to explore medicine. We can talk about that later. Community service, affiliations, research. But it's also things that you don't necessarily control, your life experiences. You know, I think you guys are young and immortal, right? And you don't realize how often life interferes with our plans. The older you get, the more you will see life interfering with your plans. This is the reason why I say no single event, no semester, no grade in a class, no academic year will derail you in this process. They want to know about what happens in your life, and they will take that into account. And that means that one of the things that medical schools value most is distance traveled. They are not comparing students against one another. And I know that sounds really weird and awkward, and everybody laughs and says, oh, that's not really true, but it is true. They are looking at where you started, what you had given to you, and where you have gone from there. Because seeing how far you have come is the best predictor of how far you will grow in the future. So it's not a competition to see who went to the best high school or even who went to the best college. It's not a competition to see whose parents were physicians and therefore got them shadowing experience. It's not a competition to see whose dad worked in the White House and therefore you got to work on the Affordable Care Act. What was given to you and what did you do with it is what really counts. Attributes. These attributes can be intrinsic attributes. Diversity, right? What is your sexual orientation, your gender identity, your faith, national origin, age, sex are all things that are important to the diversity of a class. And that diversity is important because you are learning from one another. But again, attributes that you can choose and work on, like leadership. There are medical schools that really value leadership. Vanderbilt trains leaders in science and medicine. Mount Sinai is looking for change agents. It's something that they value. Fields of interest. We want physicists in medicine. We want English majors in medicine. We want politicians in medicine. Our medical system is broken. We're going to be looking for people to fix it. We need people who are interested in finance in medicine. And finally, yeah, we're going to look at your metrics because we want to understand that you can handle the medical school curriculum. But this doesn't mean that 3.9 tells me that you can handle it. Somebody with a 3.3 that has grown across 4 years and shown me that they've learned how to learn can handle that curriculum just as well as somebody who started and had straight A's the whole time. Whereas somebody with the 3.6 who really sort of topped out in their junior and senior year because the concepts became so complex and they have a downward trajectory is a very poor predictor of performance in medical school. So it's not just a number in a vacuum, it's understanding how all of those numbers come together. Oh, look, there was a bad semester. What happened in that semester? Ha, everybody got sent home halfway through. It's the pandemic, right? Oh, that student's mother died. Oh, that student had cancer. Lots of things can happen in life that makes the numbers look not right, but which can be explained. So this is the model that they're using. And the things that they value are dependent upon the mission of the institution. And so it's different for every school. So before we jump into the self-assessment, and I'm going to show you what that form looks like, and I promise I will send it. I want to see if anybody has questions, either jump in or pop something into the chat. Izzy, are you reaching out because you have a question?
Oh, I was, my bad, I was screenshotting.
Okay, no problem. That's not a bad at all. I just thought you were waving at me. Any questions at all? All right, continue to pop in or throw something in chat. I've got my chat window open if you do have questions. So let's turn to the self-assessment. This self-assessment is going to serve a bunch of purposes. First of all, it should show me where you are relative to your goals. If your goal is to get into medical school X, then we can sort of evaluate you relative to that. It's a way of understanding your readiness for medicine. But it's also can be an opportunity to sort of look at where your strengths are and where you're spending your time and think about what that's telling you about your values and your interests, okay? If you are truly a student who is doing things that you're passionate about, that should be reflected in your self-assessment. Understanding you are never going to be the perfect applicant, right? I'm not going to look for a superior in every category. That is not possible, okay? You cannot be perfect. Nobody expects you to be perfect. They expect everybody to be different. Different strengths, different weaknesses. So this self-assessment, like the Eames model, isn't just based on competencies. It's going to be based on other attributes and experiences as well. Medical experience, for example. There's two reasons why you need to have medical experience. One is that, you know, from the medical school perspective, they want to know that you're going to make it through medical school, that you're not going to tap out halfway through going, God, every time I get into the hospital, I start gagging. I can't stand being around sick people. Not something you want to learn in medical school, right? At the same time, they want to see that you have aptitudes in medicine and for interacting with people in medical settings. But medical schools also, from your perspective, you're going to borrow enough money to buy a house to go to medical school. Before you make that investment, don't you want to know that this is really what you want to do for the rest of your life? So David Neumeyer, who's the Dean of Tufts, flat out tells me, will tell you that medical experience is not for him, it's for you, okay? Be a smart adult and know what you're getting into. Diversity is valued in medical school because of the diversity of patients, because of the diversity of opportunity, because the diversity is so critical to understanding not only your patients, but also how to interact with the rest of the medical team. I think that people underestimate maturity and readiness. The way I think about it is you are about to embark on a career where you would be making life and death decisions for people. You need some wisdom. And I think that students get so caught up in a timeline that they stop thinking about whether they are ready. And that, you know, just to be blunt, if you're applying before you're ready, you are not showing your maturity or your wisdom. And that doesn't sit well with medical schools. And finally, I'm just going to keep emphasizing this notion of distance travel. What have you done with the opportunities that are available to you? Because they are not looking at absolute achievement. They are looking at what you have done with what you have. And so every conversation I ever have with a student with a transcript open is always about growth. But you also need to think about growth in terms of your activities. It's not a contest to see who can join the most clubs. What have you done with that? Have you grown in your role in that club? Did you start off as a participant and now you're a leader? Have you added something to that club? Everybody wants to start their club all by themselves, right? The brand new club. I will tell you, okay, I've been at the college for 20 years. When you start a new club, mostly what you're doing is starting a new club. There is all kinds of paperwork. There is all kinds of getting people interested. There's all kinds of trying to figure out what the club's going to look like and not much doing. But if you join a club and you pick up the ball and you run with it, you can have great accomplishments. Think about growth, always about growth. That's what they're looking for. That's what leadership is. That is what they are trying to find in somebody who is a physician. Okay. So this is the handout. And at the end, you're going to see the competencies. At the beginning, the Eames model. There's some great stuff here that many of you have already seen, some links that I think are really wonderful. There are things that I would like you to be doing on the internet that are not student blogs and not full of toxicity and lies. Okay, these are all links that are from admissions people to you guys. This is where the truth is. Okay. So here's the self-assessment, and it's going to go through a whole bunch of the competencies as well as these other attributes and experiences that I've been talking about. And of course, it has to start with a statement of your goals, right? These are not things that are static. You have the opportunity to grow and change as this moves along. This is not something we're going to do once now. This is something that you can do over and over again and update. Your goals are very likely to change. Very likely to change. They're likely to continue to change all the way through medical school. Okay. It is rare that I see a student start where they began or end where they began. And I think that reflects growth. And like I said, we're looking for distance traveled. We are looking for growth. Knowing you've always wanted to be a doctor is not as impressive as somebody who has explored extensively as an adult, has tried new things, has picked up things that have been dead ends and have failed and have been the wrong thing to do. Those are the things that impress me and admissions officers the most. People who can tell their story organically. Stories look like a squiggly line. They are not straight. We'll pull it a little straight when we start writing your statement of purpose, but we're pretending, right? That it's a straight line. So it has to begin with your goals. We can look at grades. Grades, right? From you get to pick where you think your grades are. I will give you some guidelines. I will tell you an overall GPA from Bowdoin in the 3.334 range is very good. I think we all forget how hard this place is, what it means to be here. You guys have this lovely habit of not talking about grades, but I think sometimes that makes you guys think that everybody else has a 4.0. And you don't. I see your transcripts all the time. You don't all have 4.0s. In fact, Very, very few of you do. Okay. So it's all relative. I can say that an average GPA of a Bowdoin student who matriculates into medical school is approximately a 3.65. This doesn't mean that you're not going to get in if you have below a 3.65 or that you're definitely getting in above it. Like I said, I have students with 3.9s and above who don't get in, and I have students with 3.2s and 3.3s who do. Part of this is distance traveled. Part of this is trajectory. This is all context. What happened to you? You are not a single number. They are going to look at everything in your application from stem to stern. They're going to look at all of your transcript income to understand it. So you'll see that every single one of these boxes, not only is there an opportunity for you to pick something, but I'm looking for some explanation also as to why you picked what you did. Of course, there are metrics. Exposure to the field of medicine, as I said, is critically important, even in the context of the pandemic. Everybody needs to show that they know that they're getting what they're getting into, if for no other reason than to affirm to yourself that you understand why you're on this pathway. Leadership is very important to some schools. And I mentioned Vanderbilt. Sinai, in all of their application materials, uses this phrase change agent. They believe that the responsibility of somebody, the privilege of a physician, is to institute change, to use their bully pulpit to make a difference. Service orientation, scientific inquiry, right? I'm not looking for everybody to be superior on all of these metrics. That is not the purpose of this. You should have explored scientific inquiry, but guess what? If you take our intro science classes here at Bowdoin, in our labs, you will do real research. I don't need you to go out and do summer research if what you want to do is go explore your interest in service. It's about what's important to you. Now, that of course has an effect, but hopefully it's a good effect, right? It may make it difficult if you don't do any scientific inquiry to get into Penn, but if you're interested in working in underserved communities, Penn might not be the place for you. You might want to be at Rush or Boston University. So again, you're looking for where your strengths are and whether they match your interests. And that's what you're going to use to choose the medical schools you apply to. There are 146 allopathic medical schools, another 40-something osteopathic medical schools. You cannot afford to apply to all of them. Every year, somebody does. I get to see the overall statistics. There's always a couple of students that apply to all 146 allopathic medical schools. Let's just start with it's $35 a school and then their secondary application fees. But it's ridiculous. You cannot do that. I expect you to apply to about 15 schools. I do not think you will do a good job on your secondary applications if you get much above 15. You will start taking shortcuts. You will have to take shortcuts. And putting in a bad application does not get you into medical school. It just takes away from the time and energy you should be putting into a good application. That will be what gets in. choosing your medical schools, not based on metrics, but based on mission fit. So I'm going to leave it there. You can see that there are lots of things that we talk about, like distance traveled, extenuating circumstances. Unfortunately, sometimes disciplinary actions, in that adds complexity to your application. And we should certainly talk about that if you have been subject to any. Again, there is nothing here that is going to keep you out of medical school, though these things may change your pathway. Okay, so, whoops, wrong one. We're in the A group. So here is the check-in if you haven't already done it. And I'd like to open up to questions now. And I would say to you that when you get the form from me, and again, I apologize, I'm not quite sure why it's not working today in this Zoom session. It worked for me last night when I did my practice. But I would like you to feel free to reach out and schedule an appointment to talk about these things. This is what I do, is sit and talk about your path with you, and help you to craft a path. I will not give you the answers, but maybe I can help you think through ideas that you're having, and make some suggestions. Okay, questions? And I'm going to stop the recording there.